Today's podcast is brought to you by Kentucky Farm Bureau Insurance. Accidents happen. Without the right coverage from the right insurance company, damage to your automobile can be a real financial hit. That's why Kentuckians appreciate the competitive rates and personal service they get from Kentucky Farm Bureau Insurance. When the unexpected happens, count on us to help you get back on the road. To request a free quote, find your local KFB insurance agent at mykfbagent.com. Kentucky Farm Bureau, big on commitment. Matt, it's a good day.
It's always a good day, but it's an extra good day.
Because Timmy's here.
Tim's here again.
I'm in the house. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So Tim, you're pretty much recording this a little bit, and then you're disappearing. You have a cool thing you're going to today. Where are you going?
I'm going to the National Honeybee Expo.
Okay.
Where's it at?
It's at the Kentucky Fair and Exposition Center.
Excellent.
There's only 2 of these in the world, and we got one of them.
Nice. So is this just a bunch of bees walking around? Like, what happens at the honey?
Walking. Yeah, they're just
walking around.
I've never been to one, but I think it's a lot of people who are very interested in honeybees.
Yeah. Cool. So this podcast today, we have an interesting person that has a little something to do with the honeybee thing, but we wanted to talk about bees. We all have some experience with bees, but I have a pretty fun story.
All right, give us a bee story.
All right, so we used to
Can I do the sound effects?
You were singing gospel music before we got the text started, and I'll be honest, I kind of thought we should just open with a good Tim gospel song.
I can still do that.
Actually, let's not do. No, so when I worked, we used to have the show Bluegrass and Backroads. Okay, so I was we went and we would do all kinds of things on Bluegrass and Backroads, and always had agriculture related things, but also some things that were just kind of fun to do. And we did a honey producer, and so I was at this thing. We show up, and this guy gets me all suited up, and I get the whole thing. All right, and he gives me these huge gloves, and I got to work a camera. This is one of those old E&G cameras, big lens and all that stuff. So you need your hands to be able to do that. And he was like, "Oh, you're fine." He's like, "I never wear gloves because I'm good at this. I'm used to this." And
you looked like a natural.
Well, he said, "You'll be fine. You just be over there. Just don't start anything, and you'll be fine. They leave you alone." I was like, "Oh, okay." So I started recording, and this footage exists somewhere. Okay, I don't know where, if it's in our, but it's me recording him doing his thing. He's doing all the honey stuff, and I start getting a little braver and getting a little closer, and they're all around. You're right in the middle of it, and bam, I get nailed on the hand, and I don't know what I did wrong or what, but you could see the shot of me, and. So we actually edited it into the story. So somewhere, and I have to look, it's probably on YouTube somewhere, it's me getting stung clearly on video. But yeah, it was, I've never been in it really even since, before that or after that. It's really an unbelievable thing. These folks just walk right into it. They're everywhere. And he was his so natural to it, and he had the little smoke thing. I was learning all about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, got stung right on the hand, all right?
So to be clear, he is no gloves doing more than you're doing.
Yeah.
So you obviously did something wrong.
I
just don't know what it is.
I have no idea what it is. The only thing
That's so wild.
The only guess is that the bee was on the lens because they were all around me.
Yeah.
And maybe I went to grab and kind of grabbed it, So it got me, But so but it was super interesting how that works. Like, that's one of those things where you look back and you're like, who figured that out? Like all those millions or whatever, thousands or whatever years ago, who said, "You know what? I'm going to go over into that first of all."
I'm going to get into that bee.
I'm going to go over there with all that going on.
Yeah.
And I want to get some of that stuff.
And it, just so you know, it was not Winnie the Pooh.
You're kidding.
So that's one of my, I've been stung multiple times, like everyone, but that got me when we were kind of doing a story about them. He was like, "Oh, you'll be fine." He's one of these. "Oh, you'll be fine. Come on in here. You're covered up. Your hands be all right." Boom. It was like the first shot of the whole thing.
Not to totally change the subject, but you brought up Winnie the Pooh, and I haven't even told you guys this, but my niece is really into Winnie the Pooh, and if you've not read the original Winnie the Pooh books, it's tough reading because it's... Anyway, I'm bothered because they go on a winter adventure and Winnie the Pooh puts on a scarf. He's not wearing pants or shoes or gloves. And I just have an issue with that. And I just thought you guys should know that. Not that that has anything to do with the honey, but I just thought you guys should know I'm having issues with the fact. Again, 12, 15 years later since I've probably ever looked at a Winnie the Pooh book. I was like,
yeah, Daffy Duck does this.
I'm glad your neck is warm, Winnie. But also, doesn't it feel weird when you just say Winnie? So, Tim, this guest is good, right?
Oh, my goodness. We have gone so far off the tracks here.
Yeah.
Actually, Matt, if you got stung, chances are you didn't get stung other than that one time by a honeybee. But bees do sting, as do wasps, as do hornets. And it's generally a mechanism of defense. If they feel threatened, then that's, sort of what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And so our guest today is Ray Bowman, who is the Franklin County, Kentucky Farm Bureau president, as well as a farmer in Franklin County. And he has beehives and is the newest director with the State Beekeepers Association. I think I got all that right. And during our conversation, we had a great conversation. I asked, I said, are a lot of people scared of bees? And he said, yeah, but there's a lot of misinformation out there that bees are generally non-aggressive and that if you sort of respect them, they will respect you and you won't have to worry about getting stung.
Maybe this bee was camera shy, and that's really...
Could have been.
And didn't want any part of that.
And you didn't ask.
I didn't ask to be there.
That's on you.
Yeah, I didn't bring a photo release form for the bees, and he was mad.
It generally is on the, it generally is.
Yeah,
Now,
I'm certain of that. It was probably, they were all over me, and I'm sure I just went and grabbed, and one of them didn't like that. So.
Several years ago, there was some type of conference, a bee conference that was held over at Midway College at the time. I think it's Midway University now.
Mm-hmm.
And I was covering it for a publication I worked for at the time. And they suited me up. And I went to the hive, buddy, I tell you, because I wanted to get some up-close photos. And my instructions were, just be calm. And I mean, I had bees all over my camera, and they were just checking me out, no issues whatsoever. I just didn't make any sudden movement or anything like that. So in our conversation, Ray will explain all that, plus a whole lot about the industry and the local honey they produce and how wonderful that is. And so it was a good conversation. And I look forward to my visit today to learn more about our friends, the honeybees, which, by the way, are important pollinators for our agriculture industry.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Well, we're going to get to this, but I do think we need to make something very clear. It sounds like, Tim, Matt's just more intimidating than you.
He's scarier than me.
It must be.
Yeah.
I am frightening.
Yeah.
For this non-visual podcast you guys get to listen to, just believe us. Terribly frightening guy. Oh, man. All right, we're going to get you guys to Ray. He is wonderful. So without further ado, I'm Renee Carrico.
And I'm Matt Hilton.
I'm Tim Thornberry.
Let's get rural.
Ray Bowman, welcome to the podcast today. We appreciate you being here. Before I get anything wrong in titles, I'll let you tell our listeners who you are and a little bit about what you're doing right now.
I probably should start out by saying that I'm currently the president of Franklin County Farm Bureau. And so definitely I have a connection with the organization here and love it dearly. And recently, I was appointed a director for the Kentucky State Beekeepers Association. And I say appointed because usually they're elected. But there was a position that came open that they needed to fill after an election. And so they appointed me to fill this position for a year. And after that, we'll see. Maybe I'll run again, and maybe they'll like me enough that they'll keep me.
My guess is, Ray, that, and for folks that may not know, Ray, actually, he's a farmer here, or I say here, but in Franklin County. And I would assume that you have some bees on the farm.
Yeah, a few thousand.
A few thousand.
Yeah, which beekeepers will understand that that's really, a few thousand could only be one hive. But currently we try to maintain around 10 hives or so.
Ray, tell me a little bit about the association. What's it about? Who are members? What's their mission? Things like that.
Well, anyone can be a member. Of course, practically it is for beekeepers. But the organization itself is kind of the state functioning organization, and then there are lots of local organizations. And most communities have a local beekeepers association or club, if they choose to call it that. And they all have access to the state organization. And so we work together very closely to make sure that the interests of beekeepers around the state are taken care of. We look at a lot of different things. We currently one of the best things that we've got going is the new license plate. I don't know if you've seen those yet.
I have not.
We have a honeybee license plate, and anybody can buy the license plate, and you can have it customized. If you have a saying that nobody else has taken yet, and you know how those things work. But you can have it customized, or if you're not even a beekeeper, you just like the idea of honeybees. At the bottom of the plate, it says "Protecting honeybees," protect the honeybees. And if you like the idea of having that, if you're a beekeeper or not, you can buy one through your county, and it's I think $10 of every plate goes back to the state beekeepers for the work that we do, and there are a number of things that we're engaged in, that we're involved in. But this is something that garden clubs, other environmentally focused groups might be interested in having. So it's out there. It's available now. It's been available since I think about September, and so we encourage people to take a look at it, consider it, and get a honeybee license plate.
Ray, I would assume that one of the biggest things that the association and beekeepers in general do comes through advocacy. I'm guessing there are some misnomers, some misunderstanding about honeybees and what they do and how critical, and I use the word critical, to our agriculture industry. So I assume you do a lot of teaching to folks that may not understand completely their importance.
We do advocacy, and we do information. I prefer to think of it as informing people rather than educating people. That kind of has a negative connotation to me personally. I'd rather be informed than educated because, especially at my age. But I am a lifelong learner, so, I appreciate the information that's available. And we try to make information available, and we try to work with a lot of the misconceptions, as you say. There's a lot of hyperbole when it comes to honeybees. People sometimes want to make them more important than they actually are. They're extremely important, but civilization does not completely hinge on the existence of the honeybee. It's important. It's highly influential. But before Europeans came to this country, there were no honeybees here. There were native pollinators. We still have native pollinators, and of course, we have a great interest in native pollinators as well, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit if we have time. But people they see all sorts of things on the internet about the importance of honeybees. They're extremely important. But the world will not end tomorrow if the honeybees disappear because there are native pollinators, and there are a number of food plants and so forth that are self-pollinating that don't have to have the honeybees. However, when you're talking about almonds in California or apples in Washington State or Michigan or someplace like that, cantaloupes and watermelons in the South, those things are influenced considerably by honeybees. And, professional beekeepers travel all over the country with honeybees pollinating crops. So they're incredibly important. But we try to talk about the actual science behind the bees and beekeeping and, where they came from, why they're here, what we're doing to maintain them here, which is a challenge sometimes because they have, like anything, they have their they have their challenges. They have varroa mites and so forth. Weather is always a problem, so forth. So we try to make sure that people understand just exactly what the relationship is with honeybees. And of course, we have to deal with a lot of negative publicity by scare tactics about killer bees and that sort of thing. Yes.
You think people are scared? They first, I would think they think, well, they'll sting me, so I'm afraid of a bee, whatever kind of bee it is. You think a lot of people that aren't fully aware of what our pollinators in general do, that they're a little bit afraid. If they see a bee in the yard, they run from it, or they try to step on it, or they do something like that.
Yeah, well, we certainly would discourage that. But bees can sting. I mean, that's their principal defense. And if you make them angry, they will sting. If you don't make them angry, the chances of them stinging are very low. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but they're very low. They're not particularly aggressive. Now, we mentioned the killer bees, quote, killer bees. Well, those are Africanized bees that are mainly in the Southwest. We don't have them in Kentucky. There's some in other warmer areas like Florida, but those are bees that are of African genetics, and they are normally a little bit more aggressive. And sometimes it can be problematic. But people shouldn't think about those when they see, especially in Kentucky, when they see a bee. You leave it alone, chances are nothing's going to happen. And that's just honeybees. Then you get into bumblebees and things like that, which are absolutely not aggressive. So, yeah, there's really not much reason to fear them. You respect them, but not fear them.
I like that. Respect them. That's a good word. Years ago, and I shared this story with you the last time we talked on the phone, and this has been many years ago. I was at a conference that was held over at Midway University now, and I got the chance to go out to a hive, and they put the protective gear on me. And, the one thing I found out about the bees, they seem to be curious. I was taking some photos, and they were on my camera, and the person I was working with was very good. He said, listen, don't fear them. They're just, trying to see what you're about. And it was interesting. I felt like these guys are just curious as to who I am and what I'm doing here. Is that a common thing?
Yeah, that's a pretty accurate observation. They are curiosity would be anthropomorphizing a little bit, I think. They're protective, and they want to make sure that anything that is close to especially close to their hive, close to their honey, is not going to try to interfere. And they want to make sure that that their turf, if you will, is protected. And so, they go out and kind of make sure that you're not doing anything that's going to harm anything. And you'll see some beekeepers on social media these days. It's a big deal to work the bees without protective equipment. Mm-hmm. Well, we don't advise that. That's not a very wise approach, especially if you're not just really good at it. Mm-hmm. But it is possible to work the bees without protective equipment if you're very gentle, if you're very slow, if you don't demonstrate any fear to them or present any threat to them. There's very little chance of them being a problem. Now, they'll do little things like bump you, things like that. That's a warning. Mm-hmm. And they're saying, you might be a little bit too close. We're not comfortable with you here. Again, that's anthropomorphizing a little bit, but that's kind of what's happening with it. So I wouldn't advise anybody just to walk up on a hive without protective equipment, mm-hmm. especially mm-hmm. if you're not familiar with the way bees work. But at the same time, if you're out in a field of wildflowers or clover or something like that, and there's lots of bees around, you can be careful around them, but you shouldn't be worried about them.
Mm-hmm. My neighbor, for instance, has a couple of hives, and they're primarily there for their honey. That's what that's what they want, and they've taken all the necessary steps to learn about them, to protect them during the winter, and they keep their hives healthy, and they just love the product that they make. Local honey is a big deal at a lot of our farmers markets and even in our supermarkets now, isn't it?
Well, it certainly is, and this is a good time for me to talk about the state beekeepers and the fact that we have a certified Kentucky honey program. Some beekeepers don't take advantage of it, and they should. They should check in with us. We have a certification program where we make sure that honey is being produced in Kentucky on the farm where it's supposed to come from. There are a lot of folks that are in the business. They're called aggregators. They buy honey from other areas, and they bottle it, and they sell it under their label. Sometimes they might call it local honey mm-hmm. when it's not local honey. Mm-hmm. The best idea is to get to know your local beekeeper and buy honey directly from them. And the second best idea is to look for the little label that says certified Kentucky honey. That means that our program has investigated this farm, this apiary, and determined that they do produce locally, that their honey is local, that it is from Kentucky. And you can be assured when you see that label that we've done our due diligence to make sure that is Kentucky honey. So,
and my guess is, and I don't have any statistical information in front of me, but as we have seen the local food movement grow over the past several years, I would think honey is part of that. That people have grown to be accustomed to their farmers market or something like that. I would think that the market has grown for local honey. Is that true?
Very much so. Yes, very much so. People are very discriminate about it. And as you mentioned, the farmers markets are a good place to pick up local honey. You can usually buy it directly from the producer or from an organization that is representing the producer. I'm also a member of the Capital City Beekeepers, and capital city beekeepers go to the Frankfurt Farmers Market. Not perhaps every time that it's open, but many times a year they're at the Frankfurt Farmers Market and selling honey that is produced locally. We wouldn't sell anything else, because that's who we are. There's probably local organizations all over the state that are doing the same thing, and there literally are hundreds of local beekeeping organizations that that are a source for local beekeepers to interact, to learn, to grow, to ask questions, to develop new strategies. There's a lot of interaction. There's a lot of interface that goes on the local level, and it results in this local honey being produced and being sold at small markets, farmers markets, different places. But again, it comes back down to knowing your beekeeper. You see a jar of honey that says whatever farms, and you go, yeah, I know that guy. And you can buy it, whether you buy it directly from him or you buy it from somebody else. You know who produced it, where that came from.
That's been a big deal for this local food movement anyway, especially at farmers market, is getting to know your local farmer.
Sure.
There are a variety of products in addition to honey that you can get produce, you can get meats. It is just blossomed, pardon the pun, so much over the years that I've seen that that's a whole lot. That has a lot to do with the success of it, is getting to know the person who produces that.
And we may make a lot of puns here before it's over with, just to kind of take the sting out of things.
There you go. I was waiting for that one.
But yeah, it's I think probably easier for local beekeepers to establish their identity, than it might be for farmers, because beekeepers are maybe a little bit more. I don't know. There seems to be a mystique around beekeepers, which is fascinating to me. We're not any different than anybody else. We just do what we do. But in the general public who is not into beekeeping, they kind of see it as a mystical thing. I don't know. It's really strange.
Is it a something, a lot of, if you go back decades and perhaps even centuries, people existed because of the food that they grew on their own farm, or what neighbors did. How long have people been harvesting honey for their own use or for their neighbors' use? This isn't something that happened 20 years ago.
No, it goes back to pioneer settlers and before. I mean, the honeybee is a European bee, and it was brought over here very early on by European settlers and introduced here, and then Native Americans called it, they call it the white man's fly.
I gotcha.
And it was not, thought of real highly until there became more of them and the honey became more available, and everybody went, it's pretty good stuff here. Kind of like this.
There is nothing like local honey on a fresh biscuit, let me tell you.
And, the interesting thing about local honey is that there's going to be subtle differences from place to place where you go. My daughter was out in Seattle, I think, a month or so ago, and she brought me back some fireweed honey.
Fireweed,
which is it's a flower basically that grows up after wildfires. When there's been a burn of some sort, this is the first flower that emerges, and they get the bees in there on those flowers and harvest that honey off of it and market it as such. And it's interesting. It's very different. sourwood honey is very different. There's just different types depending on the region and what is available to the bees to forage in that area. So it's fascinating.
You know, a couple of years ago, I was down in West Kentucky visiting some folks that had a beautiful crop of rapeseed, canola, I think. Is that right? Is that the other word for rapeseed?
Yes.
Okay. Or the other variation of that plant. And it was just beautiful flowers. They almost glowed across the hillside. And along one edge of the crop field were honeybee hives, and they brought those out every year that there was a crop there because they said it made such good honey.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty amazing. Do you see a whole lot of that?
Yeah, sure. I have an interesting story from one large-scale honeybee producer that he takes hives to canola fields, and the guys that work for him always complain about it because the bees like the canola blossoms, but there's something about the blossom that kind of is protective. So when they touch it, it slaps them. And the bees come back a little bit upset. So these guys are working these bees, and they're finding that the bees are a little bit more aggressive, a little spicier than usual, and so they're not really crazy about it. But it is a very legitimate practice to use bees to pollinate canola, and it produces pretty good honey.
I've had it. The farm family in question brought me a jar of that. And man, I tell you what, it was very different. I would say very different, not incredibly different, but it was different from, say, store-bought honey that I'd had before or something that I got at a local restaurant. It was very good, though, and that was really what that beekeeper was after was the pollen from this particular plant. So every crop that they had, he, as far as I know, he would come back with his bees to do that. So,
well, they're very different, and sometimes it's seasonal, sometimes it is just the production. But in the spring, my honey is primarily clover and some wildflowers, and so it's very light and clear, and it's got a very light taste. And then in the fall, they get into things like goldenrod, other things that bloom, in the fall for the fall flow.
We have lots of goldenrod.
Well, goldenrod's wonderful. Now, goldenrod, people think goldenrod is problematic, and I think what happens is they conflate that with ragweed. Ragweed does cause respiratory problems. Goldenrod does not. But the bees love the goldenrod in the fall. It's a primary forage. I put out buckwheat for mine. Mm-hmm. A lot of the things that flower in the fall will produce a very dark honey, a lot richer honey. Sometimes my honey in the fall is almost like molasses.
Gotcha.
And it's a totally different experience, but I like it. And a lot of people come to me and say, yeah, I want to make sure that I get some of that fall honey because it's just really dark and rich and, really full-bodied. I really like that. It's almost like some people talking about different wine vintages,
Yeah.
And they start talking about the bloom and the bouquet of the wine, of the honey, and it's full bodied and it's rich and it's this and that and the other, and it's true. There's just so much variation and so much difference, but it's all good.
Maybe in a state where we hear a lot about the spirits world, where we're talking about the full bodied. Whatever the drink is, maybe we need to start talking about honey in those terms.
Well, there's a lot of people doing bourbon infused honey now.
Didn't know that.
There's people doing storing honey in bourbon barrels, and so there's there's a little bit of a crossover there going on already. Infused honey is interesting. You can infuse it with practically anything. And some people make hot honey with pepper. And
I've heard of that.
Just various different things. It's such an incredibly flexible platform to use. It's just I don't know. I could talk all day about honey. It's just wonderful stuff.
Well, it's really good. I know that much. I'm as people that have read my column and heard me talk before. Food's a big thing for me.
Well, we all got to eat.
Ray, you mentioned earlier pollinators. Honeybees are not the only pollinators we
by
see
no
around
means.
here, and so educate me a little bit about what other species are out there.
I wish I could remember just exactly how many bee species there are just in Kentucky alone. Not to mention in other areas of the world. But I mean, here in Kentucky, we've got mason bees, we've got carpenter bees, we've got leafcutter bees, we've got all these different kinds of bees. Now, honeybees are the ones that we see the most and hear the most about because they do produce honey. The others produce a honey-like substance that they feed their offspring. But the honeybees are overachievers. Mm-hmm. They make far more honey than they ever really need, which is, when some people get that don't understand how it works, they may get a little upset and they say, "Well, you're stealing honey from the bees." I guess that's one way to put it. I mean, we used to call it robbing the hives, but it's more of a harvest than it is anything else because the bees produce more honey than they actually use, and so we can kind of share it with them. We got to make sure that we leave enough in the hives for them to survive the winter, to have their winter stores. But again, they make so much that we can take some of it off of them. But the honeybees are the only ones who do that. The other bees are critical pollinators. There's not as many of them. There are some people that would argue that the honeybees overcompete with native pollinators, and that's I guess there's a degree of merit to that, but the main thing that we have to remember is that we have to provide them with that forage, which is why we encourage people to plant pollinator gardens, to use areas that aren't really useful for anything else in agriculture, to let them maybe grow up a little bit and maybe even, plant the edges in pollinators and pollinator gardens and that sort of thing. But to kind of bolster what's already there and make sure that there's less of that competition there so that the native bees and wasps and hornets and others that are usually not thought of as pollinators, but they do pollinate. And so there's got to be something for them there, and it's our responsibility to make sure that we don't make sure that every lawn is a pristine green lawn. It's okay to let some clover grow up. It's okay to have some dandelions because that's the first food that, essentially the first food that the bees get in the spring. It's okay not to have a perfect lawn. Because that's what's going to allow the bees in. Of course, the less you treat it with herbicide and so forth, the better off you're going to be as far as having the pollinators come in. And we haven't even talked about butterflies. Butterflies are pollinators, and there's so much attention being paid to monarch butterflies and different butterfly species, and they're incredibly important.
You know, going back to the lawn thing, they never have to worry about mine because I love the dandelions when they come up. And so I do not have one of those pristine yards, and that's okay. I'm all right with that. You know?
I don't want to put a guilt trip on anybody, but you see people sometimes out there just digging up dandelions and really, you know, making sure that they're just not around at all. And they're important, not just for our honeybees, but for the native pollinators that are out there.
You know, through the years, I've actually taken my camera out and take a lot of pictures of dandelions because I think they're pretty.
Well, I take a lot of dandelion pictures too, but they've usually got bees on them when I do that.
I've thought of 1,000 questions here, Ray. One of the things you talked about, I see on highways, especially interstates,
Right.
in the divides. Every so often you'll see, especially once those plants bloom, there's a sign there that says pollinator area or something like that. That's, I don't know if that's fairly new or not, but it's new to me to see some of that. And so those are really protected areas and areas that hopefully pollinators can thrive in those spots.
You serve two purposes by doing that. First of all, the pollinators do get the benefit of having wildflowers and so forth in there. And not just wildflowers, but any plant that produces a bloom, some more important than others. You know, it depends on the amount of nectar they produce, the amount of pollen they produce, and so forth. Like we could get way down in the another pun. We could get real down in the weeds with that. But, you know, they are important from that aspect, from having those there. But the other side of it is it costs a lot of money to keep those areas maintained if, you know, if you got guys out there mowing and everything like that. If you let them grow up in pollinator plots, you just leave them alone and let nature take its course, so to speak. When the plants die back, they're not as pretty, but they still provide a very important resource, especially for non-native, or for native pollinators, rather. Native pollinators like bumblebees and so forth will build their nests. The queens will overwinter in leaf litter and different things like that. Lots of plants have hollow stems that can be utilized. That's where sometimes the mason bees and smaller bees like that come in. But, you know, there's just, there's more to it than just what you see. And it's important on those two aspects of it are really important.
You know, I'm a big blueberry fan. And I read somewhere where bumblebees are wonderful pollinators for blueberries.
They are. Honeybees like blueberries too.
But, you know, there is nothing to me like a fresh blueberry. I'm not talking. I'm not kicking any grocery store down the road, but there is a huge difference between what you can go to the farmer's market during the season and get and what you get, say, in January.
Mm-hmm.
And so pollinators are very important to crops like that, I would assume.
Sure, absolutely. Any kind of berry crop. We grow strawberries and blackberries, and the bees love them. As I mentioned earlier, melon crops. The bees do really well on those. Cucurbits like pumpkins and squash and that sort of thing. They produce nice big blooms.
Mm-hmm.
The bees love them. So, you know, when you're a home gardener, you don't think as much about it, but think about it when you plant those things. You're planting them not just for what you're going to get out of it, but the bees are going to get a lot out of it too.
Do you think, Ray, when people, it's lawn care time, things like that, and they see a honeybee in the yard, but they may not know that there are hives around, is that an indication that there are? I don't know as far as traveling or how they move around or things like that.
The foragers move from 2 to 3 miles from the original hive, which can be a maintained colony, like I have, or it can be a feral colony that's out in a tree somewhere. So when they see a bee, it's got a home somewhere within about a 2-mile range, but usually it's a little bit closer than that. So yeah, there are bees around. Dr. Tom Seeley has written a lot about bees. He wrote the book Honeybee Democracy, which is an extremely important book about how bees make decisions about what they're going to do. And again, we're starting to anthropomorphize a little bit about that. But they do, in a sense, make decisions about where they're going to go and what they're going to harvest and so forth and so on. So when you see a bee, the chances are it came from someplace close. And Dr. Seeley has done a lot of research about bee lines. Now, you hear, in common euphemism, you hear about making a beeline to something. Well, there's something to that, because where that originally came from is the bees use the shortest distance they can, or the shortest path they can from their hive to where they're foraging. So if you watch the bees, and this is what the old timers used to do to be able to find honey trees or to collect bees or whatever, if you watch the bees, they are moving at some point back to their hive in a straight line, so you can follow them. So yeah, they're as economical as they can be. When I say they can travel up to a couple of miles, they're not going to do that if there's anything close that they like, if they prefer it. If there's something that they really like someplace else, yeah, they'll go to it.
That's amazing. I never knew that about that. Something else I found interesting, Ray, I was on the USDA website, and I put in the question, are honeybees considered livestock? And according to the USDA, they say yes.
Yes, that's a bone of contention with some people.
Well, several years ago, I remember after seeing that, I had written a story about that, and I won't say that I got some questions about that.
I don't doubt that.
Does something like that help the cause or hurt it?
I'm not going to say that it helps or hurts. People have different views about things. Sometimes it can be used against the beekeepers, by calling them livestock. It indicates that we're treating them less professionally than perhaps we should. But I mean, to me, I don't have an issue with it, because we are maintaining them, and we are maintaining them for a product, and we are for several things, for the pollination, for the honey, for so many different things. But they're important, and it really doesn't matter whether we call them livestock or not. To me, it doesn't. Now, it might help in some ways. One of the things that we're currently working on is trying to get a sales tax exemption on equipment for beekeepers. That'll be coming up. As a matter of fact, it may be filed as we speak. The state legislature is going into session, and I expect that bill to be filed just any day. Dan Pfister, we talked to him about it, and he was very interested in it and said, why hasn't this been done before? And it's been attempted before a few times, but it's failed. And hopefully this time people will understand the importance of it, how much this would be an encouragement to people to expand their operations, perhaps to get into it. The sales tax is not a huge impact on the state. We've done economic impact. The Legislative Research Commission has done economic impact statements on it, and it looks like it might have a $200,000 to $300,000 impact on the state's revenue. But if you take that and figure the amount of positive impact that it could have on the beekeeping community and on people who selling the equipment and so forth and so on, I think it's kind of a wash, and I think it would be. Obviously, we support that, and we think it'd be a tremendous opportunity for beekeepers to have to be able to get their stuff without having to pay sales tax on it. Because, as you know, livestock producers, I'm a cow guy too. I raise cattle. I don't have to pay sales tax on the cattle feed, the equipment that I use, to raise my cattle. When I raised sheep and goats, I didn't have to pay in sales tax on that stuff. So why should honeybees be any different? And to that regard, maybe it is good to think of them in terms of livestock, if it will help us to achieve that. But that brings up another interesting point about the State Beekeepers Association, is not only the advocacy that we're doing, but the work that we're doing with legislation. Last year, the honeybee, the honey house bill was passed in the legislature, and basically what it did was amend an existing legislation that raised the amount of honey that you can produce from 150 to 500 gallons without having a certified honey house. Certified honey houses are great for large producers, but they're extremely expensive. So if you're doing 500 gallons or less now, and that's, people go, wow, 500 gallons, that may not be that huge for some of our producers. But 500 gallons or less, you do not have to have a certified honey house, and that was a pretty big deal. There's some other things that we're looking at in terms of legislation, and you'll see more and more. Hopefully, you'll see more and more about it. These bills concerning honeybees have a tendency to fly under the radar. Another pun, but they have a tendency not to be as dramatic, maybe as sexy as some other bills that go through the legislature, but they're extremely important when it comes down to promoting honeybee production, honey production, the things that we're doing as beekeepers in Kentucky. And the State Beekeepers Association is extremely interested in all those things and trying as much as we can to create a very positive environment for beekeeping in Kentucky. The same fellow that, as a matter of fact, Scott Moore, who is with Jefferson County Farm Bureau, he is he heads up our certified honey program, and he's also our chief legislative liaison, and I've been working with him and some others on this newest piece of legislation, trying to get it through. So these things are important, and if it weren't for a state organization that kind of takes the lead on these things, they might not carry as much weight. And so the state organization is very important in a number of different areas.
Absolutely. Ray, I have one other question for you.
Yes, sir.
Do you get a lot of folks at like the local meetings? You were talking about Capital City Group. Do you get a lot of folks that have become interested in beekeeping? Maybe they've never done it before, or they know somebody that does it. Do you see them coming to these local meetings to learn and possibly get involved?
Oh, absolutely.
And do you think that number's growing?
It is. We see that a lot. And I can't speak for all of the local organizations, but I think probably they kind of operate under the same philosophy that we do at Capital City. People come in and they have questions, and we answer their questions as best we can. But we also have some suits. When we do a meeting, we meet at the Extension office. Out behind the Extension office, there's a bee yard. And so we have suits. We suit them up, and we take them out and show them a little bit about what it's like to be working the bees and the different aspects of it. You can't, in a short amount of time, you can't completely teach somebody how to be a beekeeper, but at least it gets them excited and enthusiastic, or maybe it shows them, well, this might not be a good fit for me, But
which is just as important, I would say.
Absolutely, absolutely. We don't want people getting into this and finding out that, oh, this is horrible. I never wanted to do anything like this. That doesn't happen very often. Usually, when people start getting into bees, they absolutely immerse themselves in it, which is a wonderful thing. And that's the nice thing about local organizations. The state organization helps out with that. The kind of the ongoing joke is that if you ask 10 beekeepers the same question, you'll get 12 different answers. So, and most of them will start with, well, it depends. So there's not necessarily a concrete answer to every question, but certainly there is an answer that'll at least get you started in the right direction so that you can find out for yourself how you want to go about doing this.
Well, it's all very interesting to me. Bees have long been a subject that I've written about, pollinators in general. I think it's important to keep that information out there. And certainly been a pleasure to have Ray Bowman in the studio today to
Thank
talk
you very
about
much, sir.
that. And we hope that you will be attentive to this podcast and others as we move forward. So thanks again, Ray, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Absolutely.